Um, I'm Candle Summers. Many of you have met me, and I'm really happy to be here. And I thought I would take just a short amount of time, especially because of time, telling you a little bit about myself and my background. Um, More later, but it doesn't have to be this week. Uh, I have been involved in the Dharma since my first 10-day retreat with S.N. Goenka, who I met when I was in my 30s in California at Mendocino Woodlands. And he and his wife were giving a retreat. And I just loved the fact that they were both there. They both were sitting together in front of the practicing group. And in the afternoons, his wife would be washing out their saris and hanging them up over the railing to dry. So every day when I walked by their um, abode, there would be white billowing sarongs, really thin white cotton sarongs. And it has left a good imprint on me because how many people have been to a 10-day retreat? Has anybody been to a 5-day retreat? Okay, that's good. Um, uh, as you well know, the mind goes pretty crazy for quite some time. And in the Goenka style, there's no walking practice, there's only sitting practice. And so, as a 30-something person, I had my knees propped up, my shoulders were killing me from the weight of my shoulders, all kinds of physical dukkha that goes on. But it was the beginning of my path, and when I moved from California to Hawaii, where I lived for 35 years, um, I found my main teachers, Steve Armstrong and Kamala Masters, and I still sit with Kamala on Wednesday mornings. She has an online group on Wednesday mornings. Um, and that lineage of teachers, if you know anything about lineages, or if you've been in Hawaii, when you go to a hula, the very first chant they do is the long name of their ancestors, from beginning to however many names they can remember. And every Hawaiian name is probably 3 very long words that means something very special. So mine's going to be really simple. Kamala and Steve's teacher was Upandita, Sayadaw Upandita, whom I never met. He died about 10 years ago, so he was ill by the time I was exposed to him. Sayadaw Utejaniya, who is still around, and I was part of the retreat at Vipassana Metta Foundation on Maui, which is where Steve and Kamala have a sanctuary that people can go to sit for 2 weeks to a month or more at a time. And the other main teacher is Anagirika Munindra. Does anybody know who Munindra is? You might have heard references to him. He's a very loving teacher of metta. He was a celibate layperson, and he was Kamala's teacher and taught many of the other teachers who brought some of the current modern Buddhism to the United States. And so I want to really give a hearty welcome to all of us, and the importance to me of this welcoming and us forming community, that we study together and we practice together for the benefit of all beings and for this living earth. And we recognize the suffering that's caused by biases and prejudices, systems of power and privilege, and oppression based on our identities of race and sex, class, age, ethnicity, religion, national origin, ability, our sexual orientation and gender identity or expression, and the many intersectionalities of these various identities. And we really aspire to do no harm and to dismantle barriers that are causing this separation and suffering, and recognizing that our liberation is interconnected with the liberation of all. And so as we establish our community, it's important to have these guidelines that through mindfulness and loving kindness we work with intention to ensure that everyone feels welcome, safe, and respected within this budding community. And we recognize that this work is complex and it requires continuous learning. And we listen to and act upon the needs expressed by those in non-dominant cultures. And our efforts at shared leadership accept the responsibility to set the tone and develop policies and practices to promote full inclusion. Creating the inclusive community that we desire will require the support and commitment of each of us as Sangha members. And I also want to give a territory acknowledgement of the native lands, that we want to recognize and honor the indigenous peoples of this region whose ancestral lands we are on. It includes the Willamette, the Clackamas, the Multnomah, the Tualatin, and dozens of tribes and bands that make their home here in the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde and the Cowlets and the tribes of the Siletz and many other native communities that made their homes along the Willamette and Columbia rivers and up into the Cascades since time immemorial, a long time. And this land acknowledgement is one small part of disrupting the dismantling colonialism. They are the beginning of the conversation, and you might want to get in touch with local indigenous nations or organizations to build relationships and support their work. I particularly like going to Indigenous Peoples Marketplace, which has exhibits all over North and Southeast Portland and on the PSU campus. So if you want to know any more about it, you can ask me. NAYA is the most well-known local organization, Native American Youth Association. And they just purchased the land that they were leasing in Northeast on Columbia Boulevard. And they actually have something coming up May 15th, which is Youth and Elders Honoring Ceremony. So that would be a really interesting thing to go to if anyone's interested. And we also acknowledge those who came here as settlers, as migrants, either in this generation or in the generation past. And those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly those who were brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and built the foundation of our country. This living acknowledgement of Black labor is a statement that recognizes and honors the African people who were enslaved at the hands of white colonizers and subjected to unpaid labor, and the descendants of enslaved African people. We acknowledge and remember those who did not survive the Middle Passage, and those who were beaten and lynched at the hands of white Americans, and those who are still suffering while fighting for their freedom. The purpose of recognizing this deep and difficult history is to show respect, gratitude, and appreciation for the insurmountable contributions of the enslaved who worked the land against their will for generations for the sake of American capitalism, as well as increased awareness about the horrific outcome of a distorted Black American history. And additionally, see, I told you this was going to be an exercise on concentration and breathing and listening and being present. We'd like to recognize the Asian ancestors of our Buddhist lineages. Buddhism was introduced in the United States by Asian immigrants in the 19th century, when significant numbers of immigrants from East Asia began to arrive in the New World. In the United States, immigrants from China entered around 1820, but began to arrive in large numbers following the 1849 California gold rush. Immigrant Buddhist congregations in North America are as diverse as the different peoples of Asian Buddhist countries who settled here. The U.S. is home for Sri Lankan Buddhists, Chinese Buddhists, Japanese Buddhists, Korean Buddhists, Thai Buddhists, Cambodian Buddhists, Vietnamese Buddhists, Burmese Buddhists in the Theravadan tradition, and Buddhists with family backgrounds in most Buddhist countries and regions. And the Immigrant Act of 1965 increased the number of immigrants arriving from China, Vietnam, and the practicing countries of Southeast Asia. And it's especially important to actually mention that in the United States, May is Asian American Pacific Island Heritage Month. So if you've ever heard of it, AAPI. And so we honor with gratitude the roots of the Vipassana insight tradition and many others in South and Southeast Asian cultures, and the vital role that Asian communities have played in growing American Buddhism, which is, I find to be important because lots of times nowadays you hear people say that their group is based on, American Buddhism. And oftentimes that seems to be what is actually more like modern Buddhism brought by white students who went to India and Asia 50 years ago and came back here and began teaching on the East Coast and the West Coast, where they developed centers like Insight Meditation Center and Spirit Rock and Seattle Insight and Sacramento Insight. But, honestly, easily one of the most enduring forms of American Buddhism was the Jodo Shinju Buddhism, the Pure Land sect, or the Shin for short. It was the first Japanese community to settle in what is now an American territory, arriving as immigrant laborers to the sovereign nation of Hawaii in 1868. For 4 decades, nearly 500,000 Japanese would arrive in the Americas to work sugar plantations of Hawaii and railroads of the American West. It and the Handa Hangwangji Mission of Hawaii have been the largest Buddhist organizations outside of Asia for much of the 20th century. It might not be as well known as Zen or Tibetan Buddhism, since this sect doesn't live up to the monk in robes expectations that many Americans are exposed to that are popular in our culture. And I want to cite a letter in the book Be the Refuge, and I brought the book and it's back over there on that table if you want to look at it later. In the first chapter on erasure, Ryo Imamura wrote a letter to Tricycle magazine on their very first publication in 1992. And it's a fascinating reflection about true American Buddhism. So if you want to check it out over there, you can. And so just one last thing on the AAPI communities. It consists of approximately 50 distinct ethnic groups speaking over 100 languages, with connections to Chinese, Indian, Japanese, Filipino, Vietnam, Korea, Hawaii, and other Asian and Pacific Islander ancestries. Taiwan, Korea, Indonesia, the Philippines, Singapore, Samoa, Thailand, and Vietnam. And in South Asia, including India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Bhutan. So you can really feel in your hearts the broad base of Asian American Pacific Islanders. And it was originally celebrated during this first week of May, and then Congress expanded the observance to the full month in 1990. So May was chosen as the month to commemorate the AAPI history because the first Japanese immigrants came to America on May 7th in 1843. So that's your history lesson on AAPI. and it seems really important for May to acknowledge it. And so finally, the May carries a profound significance in the Buddhist community as well. Sounds like that speaker's doing some popping over there. Let me know if it's trouble. Because it's Vaisakha, a cherished festival day throughout Southeast Asia celebrating the Buddha. It's celebrated on the first full moon of the month. And so this year, Vaisakha falls on May 22nd. Oh, maybe that's me. It could be me. So if you Google Buddhist temples near me, you'll find a large variety of temples in Portland. Like there's at least 20. And just around our area here, I can think of 3. And so if you want to do something unusual and educational and heartwarming, anytime during the month, but maybe particularly on Wesak, on May 22nd, the full moon, you might want to go to any one of the temples that you've never been to and pay homage there to the Buddha and see how that temple celebrates Vaisakha, or just be in that temple knowing that generations of people have been celebrating, and right here in Portland there's a lot of them. So I've been, talking on long enough about this, but it's important to lay this foundation. And I promise I won't say all of that every time. I printed it up and I put it in a little plastic sleeve over on the table so you can read it again and know that it's the basis of us being together. And I'd like to end this part with a quote from Larry Yang. And he says, "For me, it is through the lenses of community and identity that I began to see how identity can be a door into Dharma practice and spiritual freedom. The beauty of the Dharma is that everything, even all the particulars of identity, is integral to our spiritual practice. Accordingly, freedom is not just about transcending identity, but embracing it until what is beyond the experience of identity reveals itself. And as with much of our human experience, this is not always a linear process." And so our final guidelines together that we've come up with as a core group is that we strive to be a scent-free space for people with sensitivities. So please refrain from wearing scents when you come. There's a garden in the back. There's a door right out here beside the elevators that leads there for those that might have neurodiversities and are looking for a quiet space. If there are other ways you can signal for your comfort and engagement, please feel supported to speak up. And for the safety of our members and to cultivate a space in which all feel free to share, racist, homophobic, ableist, trans, or non-binary exclusionary language is not condoned in this space. It's our responsibility as a group, when we hear something, to say something as a call in to help both protect our members and allow growth, communication, learning, and connection. And so when we introduce ourselves, if anyone is going to speak, we'll use the pronouns that you prefer. And why do we use the pronouns? Out of respect and acknowledgement for those who do not identify with the binary pronouns that were given to them at birth. Pronouns are a part of someone's gender expression, and people can have multiple sets of pronouns for themselves, using both he, him, and his, or she, her, and hers, or they, them, and theirs. Pronouns are not preferred, but actually they're required for respectful communication. And mistakes happen, and we strive for forgiveness when they happen, as we all learn and grow together. As Beatrice Berry says, one of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal is the tool of diversity. By learning from and tapping into a variety of information, philosophies, and theoretical perspectives, we can not only change the way we see the world, but we can change the world that lies within. I am certain that my ability to move beyond the poverty that I grew up in was largely due to the diversity of information, ideas, and people who became a part of my life. When I opened my mind and heart to the diversity of the world, I opened the avenues to succeed. So as we let those words settle down and find our place of noble seat, knowing that we've been listening with mindfulness and breathing with mindfulness, we can continue this by taking a few moments to acknowledge the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. In acknowledging the Buddha, it's the fundamental awakeness, which is ever present and always available in this very lifetime. And the Dharma, the teachings that help us freely and fearlessly meet the way things are right now. And Sangha, our intimate, infinite connectedness with all beings. And by directing our attention toward our deepest nature, by honoring the essence of our being, we are taking refuge in the truth of who we are. On the internal level, the contemplative mind, the temple of wisdom, of clear awareness, that is the refuge. As we sit here in this temple of our gathering, in person or in our homes, we might hear birds outside or breezes or air conditioning sounds or other people in the building where we are or cars. We create this internal temple where we can be quiet and comfortable and still and create a peaceful environment for ourselves. Letting the eyes gently close or letting them be focused on nothing in particular out in front of you, just allowing light to be felt. And as we develop this stability, this space that the heart abides in by taking on the acknowledgement of the homages of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, then often we might find that the world of the senses or thoughts or feelings, things going on with the body, can do whatever they like. It can be blowing and raining and cold or hot. Our heart can take refuge in the safety and the stability of the refuges and of the precepts. I was going to have us go around and do the refuges and precepts in call and response. Because of time, I will not. Instead, I'm just going to recite them in Pali, the language that the Buddha spoke. First, I'll ring the bell. So the first part of paying homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha is repeated 3 times. And then the precepts. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranam gacchami. Danang saranam gacchami. Sanghang saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi buddhang saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi danang saranam gacchami. Dutiyampi sanghang saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi buddhang saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi danang saranam gacchami. Tatiyampi sanghang saranam gacchami. And additionally, the precepts are a way of making a safe container for ourselves and others around us to practice in. We're making certain ethical agreements to live in harmony with each other during this time period. The precepts can be alive for us as we pay attention to them. I'll do them in English this time so that you can be reminded of what they are. I undertake the training of the heart and mind to refrain from taking the life of any living being. It also can be said, I aspire to become kind and of service to all beings. I undertake the training of the heart and mind to refrain from taking that which is not freely given. Another translation, I aspire to become generous to all beings. I undertake training of the heart and mind to refrain from sexual acts which cause harm. I aspire to nurture love, relationships, and beauty. I undertake the training of the heart and mind to refrain from false and harmful speech. I aspire to use speech to create happiness, harmony, and understanding. I undertake the training of the heart, mind, to refrain from the use of intoxicants and substances that cloud the mind. I aspire to cultivate mindfulness and wisdom. And so as we take this next period of time to sit quietly, perhaps some of the words from the precepts are noticeable. They might show up in your mind stream as you're sitting. You can relax the body in its chosen place. Maybe you feel gravity where the buttocks is on the chair, or maybe you feel your feet on the floor, reminding us to be embodied. We might notice what's happening with the nervous system, feeling it go through the body. We may notice the quality of the breath. Where do we feel the breath? Is it noticed at the nostrils? Do we feel it in the diaphragm? Do we notice the sensations that arise? Can we attend to pressure? On the rising and the falling, bringing ourselves into the present moment. Oftentimes the breath is a way to really be present, or the sensations of the breath, pressure on the inhale at the diaphragm, or release of pressure when there's more spaciousness on the exhale. Or we may notice it at the nostrils, whether it's warm or cool, rough or smooth. Is the breath shallow or deep? And you probably have your own way of practicing. But you can also notice that everything that arises comes to us through our senses, through hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, and the mind door. And so we have the option of noticing constantly changing objects. What arises and comes to the ear door? What do we notice at the taste door? At the touch door? At the thought door? Mindfulness and awareness are present. For constantly changing objects, which oftentimes, if we have sleepiness coming, we can pay more attention as we notice the senses. Or if we have a mind that is agitated or irritated or just quick and flighty here and there, we can just settle on the breath at whatever place you notice it the most, at the nostrils or at the belly. The Buddha gave his practices in hundreds of different ways for different kinds of personalities. For different times that things arise in the mind, there might be doubt, or there might be agitation, there might be grasping or clinging, or pushing away, or maybe there's a sense of boredom, or it's hard to find interest. We just begin again by going to one of those places, the breath or the sense doors. And if we need to stimulate ourselves a little to stay a little more awake or interested, we can reflect on the Dhamma. We can reflect on kindness. We can hold ourselves in kindness. We can reflect on compassion. We can notice what's happening right as we wake up from a moment of tiredness. Oh, present here and now. And so we have this right effort, right energy, just enough to stay interested in what's happening. And when we find ourselves spacing out or spacing in, we can start over by going back to the breath or waking up in that moment again. And sometimes sitting is hard to do. If you feel like standing up and doing a short walking practice, or just standing up in place for a while and sitting back down again, it's a good way to stay interested. returning again and again to the present moment experience. What does it feel like in the body? What is happening in the heart and the mind right now? Holding yourself in kindness and in compassion. Beginning again in this process of seeing clearly the impermanent nature of everything that arises and passes away. And we see this, we know it by direct experience. Sometimes we might have an intention or a phrase to go back to. May I be at ease. Or may I be present and awake in this moment. And then noticing where we are, without judgment, without shame, but with the intention and aspiration of being awake and aware to each moment, noticing, oh, I'm pushing that moment away. Oh, I'm grasping at this moment. I want something that's not happening. Or maybe we're inclining toward positive thoughts, positive trains of thought. I'm going to wake up in this moment and be aware. There's some pleasant sensation of kindness and compassion for myself and for others. Whatever it is, we just keep beginning again. As we're reminding ourselves over and over to begin again and to be in the present moment, may we hold ourselves with kindness. May we be at ease, alert yet relaxed. whatever emotions arise or thought forms arise, mindfulness, awareness are present. Mindfulness sees what's happening, awareness is present with it until it disappears on its own. We can't really control these conditioned things arising, but we can see clearly that they are impermanent, that they're arising and passing away. Awareness stays with it. When the object of our attention fades away, awareness fades away and comes again to meet the next object of our awareness. And we can hold ourselves with kindness through all of this. And as we bring our attention once again to the container of our bodies sitting in this place, letting spaciousness of our heart, whatever that feels like for you, what happens? How can you conjure up some goodwill, some kindness? What helps you find that place in your heart? Thoughts about a child, an animal, a friend, a benefactor, a family member. And we want to encourage these thoughts of kindness to stay within this fathom-long body, this container of our body breathing. Holding this vision, this view, this sense that we can be at ease. May I have happiness and the causes of happiness. And if we remember in Buddhist thinking, happiness is relief from suffering. And those conditioned things that rise and pass away, when we see it with mindfulness, it brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. So as we keep within this body of our breathing, may we hold ourselves with kindness and have happiness and the causes of happiness. And may we also include within our hearts a person that comes to mind, maybe a friend or a benefactor, a teacher, holding that person in view, holding them in the cauldron of our hearts, including them in that spaciousness of kindness and well-being. And may we let this well-being flow to others around us, to others within our family or friends. May we let it flow to people that we don't know, those seen and unseen beings, those beings that are in suffering and those that are in joy. Those that are enlightened and those that are unenlightened. May all beings everywhere have happiness and the causes of happiness. Be free from suffering, enmity, and danger. Beings in all directions, to the north, the east, the south, and to the west. May all beings everywhere be safe and protected and have ease. May they have compassion for themselves as we have compassion for them. May they touch upon equanimity, being free from falling into extremes. May they touch upon joy, and may we hold in our hearts sympathetic joy for those that we know in joyous states. May all beings everywhere be free from enmity and danger, have ease and well-being. Anicca vata sankhara upadavaya domino upakitawa meruchanti te samvapasamo sukho. All conditioned things are subject to impermanence. They arise and pass away. And seeing this clearly brings the greatest happiness, which is peace. Thank you for that time of silence together. And we can take like a 3 or 4 minute break to stand. There's a bathroom right out here. Will not take as long as we probably want to take because I have a Dharma talk, but it's not too long. Surprisingly enough, I started out, Trina's heard about this, I started out with a Dharma talk that was about 45 minutes, probably 50 minutes long. And I decided, no. Plus, I want it to be on a wisdom topic of the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, of dana and sila and bhavana. And those are complicated topics. So I divided it in half for your benefit. So let's stand up for a moment. Trina, I can't seem to pause the recording. Are you able to do that?
You might want to kind of turn the camera of the iPad or the laptop a little bit away from. Yeah, there you go. Great.
So it's important to lay a strong foundation of understanding the Buddha's teachings. And sometimes it seems dry, so just let the words flow through and know that listening to the Dhamma is a direct way to freedom, and you're improving your mind stream just by being here. I'd like to talk about what are called the 3 pillars of the Dhamma, known as dana, sila, and bhavana in Pali, the original language that the Buddha taught, as he went around the Indian countryside teaching to large varieties of peoples, large numbers of people in large variety. Has anybody heard of the 3 pillars? Okay, good. There are also three other pillars sometimes that you hear of, and that's the threefold bliss. And threefold bliss is sila, also harmonious living, and panya, which is wisdom, for reaching complete freedom, and samadhi, concentration and meditative absorption. So sila, samadhi, and panya. If you ever recited the blessing chant, sometimes they close, and other retreat centers and stuff, they close with the blessing chant, and part of it is, may I soon attain the threefold bliss. And so that threefold bliss is sila, samadhi, and panya. But I'm going to focus on the first three, the ones that are easily developed and practiced in our daily flow of life. These were taught by the Buddha in the order of generosity first, and then as a way of life, generosity as a way of life, and sila, virtuous, harmonious living, as a way to have peacefulness in one's community, and reciprocity between monastics and lay people. And then lastly, after developing the foundation of a wholesome life, the practices of meditation were taught by the Buddha. So the teachings and practices were given in hundreds of different ways, depending on the temperament and of the person and the people that he was talking with. But for me and many of us, where my meditation practice began, meditation was brought to the Western white American Buddhists in the United States about 40 years ago, like I was talking about earlier, to various centers from people who had gone in the 80s and before, a little bit before. And so those teachings tended to start with the meditation practices. So dana and sila, generosity and harmonious living, were not as much emphasized as how to meditate, what meditation is and how to meditate. And so it's only been in the last, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years tops, that people have begun really understanding the importance of dana and sila as taught more traditionally by the Asian practitioners, coming first rather than the practice of meditation. And so at first I was going to do it backwards, because that's the way we sort of learned it, was meditation first, but I decided to do it in the right order. So today I'm going to do dana and sila, and next week I'll do bhavana. So dana, at its most basic level, the term is defined as generosity. In the Buddhist tradition, it means giving freely without expecting anything in return. And the act of giving is purely out of compassion or goodwill, or the desire for someone else's well-being. And perhaps dana is more about how we are, really, than what we do. Through generosity, we cultivate a generous spirit. Generosity of spirit will usually lead to generosity of action. And being a generous person is more important than any particular act of giving. I mean, you know, it's possible to give without it being a generous act. When you think about it. And the Buddha understood that giving was a powerful source of merit, with long-term benefits both in this life and in the lives to come. While teachings on merit sometimes don't carry much meaning for many modern Dharma practitioners, these teachings suggest unseen pathways by which consequences of our actions return to us. Dana isn't meant to be obligatory or done reluctantly. Rather, it should be performed with when the giver is delighted, before, during, and after giving. The Buddha emphasized the joy of giving. Although giving for the purpose of helping others is an important part of the motivation and the joy of giving, the Buddha considered giving for the purposes of attaining Nibbana, giving as a practice for the purpose of attaining freedom as the highest motivation. For this purpose, one gives gifts to adorn and beautify the mind. Now, what exactly does that mean? Adornments of the mind are not clinging, loving kindness, concern for the well-being of others. So we're giving to ourselves when we're practicing the act of dana. If we're doing it as the motivation of the practice for the purpose of attaining nibbana, for freedom, as the highest motivation. And it can be done joyously, without attachment. You contemplate giving before you give, the joy that it brings in giving, the joy that it brings immediately in the giving, and the joy that you can notice after the giving. So the Buddha emphasized the joy of giving. Joseph Goldstein, in his book on mindfulness, which I also brought and put back over there on the table in case you want to leaf through it. It's one of the really good books on mindfulness. He said it almost killed him writing the book. It probably did. So he mentions that there are two ways of understanding generosity. One is a spontaneous and natural expression of an open mind and an open heart. So we can identify with that pretty easily, the spontaneous and natural expression of an open mind and an open heart. And when we're connected wholeheartedly with others and the world, it's not a matter of deciding to give. Giving simply flows out of us. And this type of generosity is, one example is the generosity of a parent with their child. And the second way of understanding generosity is as a practice itself, which we can begin, even though it may not automatically feel like it's flowing out of us. The practice has two important parts in this way. First, it helps connect us with others and with ourselves. Giving creates a relationship between the giver and the receiver. So acts of generosity help us learn more about the nature of our relationships. And it also develops those relationships. Practice of generosity together with a meditation practice helps ensure that our spiritual practice doesn't occur aloof from others. I'm going to repeat that. Practicing generosity together with meditation helps ensure that our spiritual practice doesn't occur aloof from others. And second, through the practice of generosity, we begin to understand where we are closed, where we're holding back, where we feel our fear. We learn what keeps us from being generous. We take on the practice, we can see where we resist it by taking it on. We can really notice, is there a resistance to that generosity? Are we holding back? Is there fear? And we can really wake up in that practice itself to see where we resist it. Dana is a mindfulness practice. Mindful awareness brings the act of dana out of the realm of the unconscious habit and into the realm of wise attention. So, for example, we can become aware, as I mentioned before, of the joy that arises in the heart before giving. We can know the happiness during the actual moment of letting go, the happiness of letting go in the generosity of giving. It's the letting go process. Because dana is a practice, we can also become mindful when we feel the suffering of attachment and the painful part of sometimes letting go. Through doing this practice, eventually, the heart opens and the mind lets go. In a moment of mindful giving, the heart is filled with the beautiful qualities of non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. As one teacher put it, practicing dana is letting go of greed. And so that's where we can see the adornment of the heart and mind as we're noticing, being mindful of giving, that the heart is filled with beautiful qualities of non-greed and non-ill will and non-delusion. So it's helpful to frequently reflect on the ways generosity benefits the receiver. And at the same time, deepens our own practice of compassion and wisdom, which leads step by step to complete liberation. Through helping others, we're also helping ourselves and benefiting the larger community. I like what Walt Whitman says. Be not discouraged, keep on. There are divine things well enveloped. I swear to you, there are divine things more beautiful than words can tell. And we can touch into some of those in the actual embracing of dana as a practice, as a life practice. So as I move on to sila, the important part of the training that helps us feel safe and stable in our world as we interact with others. Sila is considered harmonious living, an ethical life, leading an ethical life. So ethical conduct, or sila, is built on the vast conception of universal love and compassion for all living beings, on which the Buddha's teaching is based. The Buddha gave his teaching for the good of the many, for the happiness of the many, out of compassion for the world. Among the very first teachings that the Buddha offered to his students that would provide a foundation for the entirety of the Buddhist training were the guidelines for ethical living, known as the 5 precepts. The Buddha knew that applying them to your thoughts and words and actions every day, no matter how much emotional struggle and stress clouded the mind, the precepts are integral to the Buddha's path of practice, called the Noble Eightfold Path, which guides the practice of virtue alongside the development of the mental discipline. So the virtue is the sila practice, and the mental discipline is the bhavana, the meditation practice, and the wisdom of bhavana, which I'll talk about next week. So the precepts are usually recited, as I said them earlier today. I undertake the training to refrain from taking life, refrain from stealing or taking what isn't freely given, refraining from illicit sexual conduct, which includes sex with people who are already married, in relationships, as well as with minors, and any kind of sex that causes harm to oneself or others. To refrain from unskillful speech, including telling lies and gossiping and speaking harshly. To abstain from intoxicants that cause heedlessness and cloud the mind. Much can be said about each individual precept and how living with them helps cut away the complications and entanglements and the resulting suffering we make up for ourselves. Even people who don't feel ready to meditate or take on other aspects of Buddhist practice can begin with the precepts and see positive change in their circumstances and state of mind right away. I notice this regularly. I'm sure we each have one of our favorite here that we can identify with, but Mine happens to be sometimes unskillful speech. And I notice it right away, even after it pops right out of my mouth. And so sometimes it's recommended to start with a single precept. Like, some people pledge to refrain from lying and just practicing for a period of time. As the Thai Buddhist master Ajahn Fuang Jodako once said, if you can't control your mouth, how can you ever learn to control your mind? If you can't control your mouth, how can you ever learn to control your mind? For most of us, that's a sufficiently challenging place to begin. Now, in ethical conduct, sila, which is based on love and compassion, it's interesting to note that 3 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, are all included in the sila category. Restraint facilitates peace and concentration of mind. And it can be represented by this ancient verse proclaimed by the Buddha in the collection of the Dhammapada. How many of you are familiar with the Dhammapada? It's a collected version. There's lots of different translations. It's a collection of different teachings of the Buddha from various suttas, all put together in a little bit more of a poetic form, but but most of it is in quatrains of 4 verses. So this one is not to commit wrongful deeds, but to practice good deeds and to keep the heart pure. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Not to commit wrongful deeds, but to practice good deeds and to keep the heart pure. That is the teaching of the Buddha. To keep the heart pure means to try to keep the mind uncluttered. To keep the heart pure means to try to keep the mind uncluttered. It doesn't mean that we're saintly. It means that we're reasonably aware, reasonably caring, open to ourselves and to others, and not influenced by hatred and greed and delusion. So here is a quote by Achan Moon, who expounds the virtues of moral conduct in a book written by Mei Chi. Has anybody read Mei Chi's writings? She is an enlightened layperson, and her book is fantastic. I can't think of the name of it. It might be called, one of them might be The Unentangled Knowing. So he explained, she wrote about it, that the moral virtue gained by consistently observing the 5 precepts as the foundation for being a decent human being. Each precept of the 5 precepts carries a particular benefit. So by refraining from harming living creatures, we can expect to enjoy good health and longevity. By refraining from stealing, our wealth and property will be safe from theft and misfortune. By refraining from adultery, partners will be faithful toward each other and live contentedly without feeling guilt or shame. By refraining from lying, we will always be trusted and respected for our integrity. By refraining from intoxicants, we will guard our intelligence and remain bright, knowledgeable people who are not easily misguided or thrown into confusion. People who maintain a high level of moral virtue tend to reassure living beings everywhere by conveying a sense of contentment and mutual trust, and by promoting this feeling in others. I'm going to repeat that. People who maintain a high level of moral virtue tend to reassure living beings everywhere by conveying a sense of contentment and mutual trust, and by promoting this feeling in others. The supportive and protective power of morality ensures rebirth in higher realms of existence Those who adhere to high moral standards will surely reach a heavenly destination in their next life. That's the end of this quote. So we each have the ability to practice and to develop ourselves in this life, whether we reach complete liberation or simple peace and happiness in this moment. The doors are open for us and the teachings are there. By practicing generosity and harmonious living, we have the stability of heart and mind needed to open to more subtle states of mind as hindrances fall away. As we study the Buddha's teachings and put those teachings into practice, our lives change. Practicing Dhamma principles like the 3 pillars of the Dhamma: generosity, dana, the 5 precepts, sila, and following the Noble Eightfold Path, bhavana, brings greater happiness and security into our lives. We develop the ability to face life's challenges with more skill, more patience, and more endurance. So thank you for your kind attention in listening to the Dhamma. And let's take a few moments just to sit and let the words settle down. See if you can remember a few things that pop out in the mind, even in this warm room, making us sleepy. What might have popped out around dana and sila? I like this quote in one of the suttas from the Buddha. By giving this gift, my heart will be glad. Happiness and joy will arise in me. One gives because it ennobles and adorns the mind. So in closing, please know that generosity is not only a radiant manifestation of your own metta practice, but it also allows teachers to offer the Buddha's teachings that awaken the hearts of others. And as the Buddha taught us, we practice to radiate kindness all over the world, spreading upwards to the sky and downwards to the depths. And the teachings of the Dhamma are offered freely. And anytime you feel moved to offer dana for the teachings that you receive, the donation is accepted with tremendous gratitude. And there's no obligation. And supporting those who are offering the Dhamma also supports your own heart's journey to awakening. The goodness of that ripples out to families, friends, communities, and to the world. So as we finally close for this section of it, now you can pick up that paper that does have the precepts on one side, and at the bottom of where the precepts are, I'm going to find it for Zoom people. Okay, do you see it? Okay, good. Now let me see. Oh no, that's the wrong thing I'm sharing with the screen. Gotta find the other one. Let's try this. There we go. Reflections on Universal Well-Being. So it has little downward arrows and little upward arrows. Otherwise, it's fairly monotone. So do it along with me. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and I maintain well-being in myself. I think I'll raise the pitch a little. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings be released from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their actions and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and its results will be their home. All actions with intentions, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. So as we take some of this understanding of the Dhamma with us, remembering that our actions with intention, skillful or unskillful, of that we will be the heirs. So as we continue on the path, remembering Dana and Sila and Bhavana, we encourage ourselves to incline toward the skillful. And I thought maybe I would just take a moment or two, even though it's 6:34, to just have a little short sharing to see if anything might have come up. You might have asked yourself a question or been motivated by any of that I said. Did anything, like if you were to choose one of the precepts, for example, that you think you could really benefit from for a week, what precept would you want to pay more attention to? Or if we look at the idea of Dana, what good deeds have you noticed that you've done recently, or has been done to you, or as a practice of Dana? How do you think you can encourage yourself to make it a practice, to really live by the practice of generosity? So if anybody has at least one or two sharings, if you would say your name and your pronoun, and I will switch the microphone and see what kind of bubbling comes up from your heart around Dana and Sila that you might have noticed. Anything bubble up for anyone? Going over those precepts. I get to come halfway if I have something.
Are there something? I think that's just that. I don't know if maybe their videos. They've dropped. Oh, great. Oh, Candle says that you can stop the recording, Trina.
Ah, okay.